sergeants and American airmen who were shot down. So that's where we're picking up. So there are around 1,500 men when I first arrived, that's in the camp, and by March of 1944, the number was up to 4,000. So from 1,500 when he first arrived in October of 43 to March of 44, there were 4,000 men in that camp, Americans. That doesn't count other camps with Poles in it, with Russians in it, and a number of other groups. It swelled to well over 20,000, but they were in a separate section of the camp, not mixed in with the Americans. They were all kept separate. The guards watched the camp from towers that stood in each corner with spotlights and 20-foot-high barbed wire fences between them. Each compound was fenced in with guards and dogs on patrol, just like, not to make light, but if you remember the beginning intro of Hogan's Heroes, towers, barbed wire, lights, dogs. Yeah, just like that. About 2 weeks after we arrived in 17B, I learned some of my crew members were also there. So of those 10 guys on his plane, some of those guys were in this same compound now, which makes sense because if you remember, I think we counted 7 of them were in the local jail with him. But he made a hospital stop along the way, and they may not have been in the same group with him on that same train. I learned some of my crew members was there, so I looked them up and talked to them about our last raid. They all had about the same experience as mine, except they had not been wounded. Now, Dad was not shot per se, but if you recall, he was injured because his parachute had several holes in it, so he came down a little faster than normal, and when he landed, he severely injured his ankle, although oddly, he did not break his ankle. So, hopefully everybody has audio. One of our guys here says they don't, but give me a thumbs up or wave or something if you've got audio. I certainly hope we have audio. Here's a drawing of a tower done by a GI, so probably sitting out in the yard with a piece of paper and a pencil or a piece of charcoal drawing. So there's an idea from a prisoner standpoint what one of the guard towers and one of the gates looked like. Camp was livable if there was enough food, so we learned to ration the parcels to carry us through the lean times. And if you remember from my last segment, we talked about those Red Cross parcels. That's really what kept the guys alive. What the Germans did feed them wasn't much, and the quality, of course, was horrible. As Tracy mentioned 2 nights ago, and Dad did write about it in here, the Germans punctured the cans of food before we received them, so we couldn't save the meat for escapes. And I want to reference that in a book. This is a book that's been in our family since before I was born. It's called Kriggy Memories. It's written by a man named Ben Felper. I looked Ben Felper up, and Ben Felper, before the war, worked for the Disney Company as an animator, of all things. So Ben had an interest in, I guess, journaling things, keeping track of things. And it says in the article that Ben was able to trade with a German soldier and get a camera and film. And he must have been able to continue to get film throughout the war because he took hundreds of pictures in the prison camp. And on a Monday night, the forced march, there's at least 100 pictures in this book of the forced march. And I hadn't looked at the book for years. But I'm going to flip it over and show you. This is kind of what it looks like. And interestingly enough, yes, he did handwrite everything and then put the photos to the side of it. This book is copyrighted in 1946, and I doubt if there was ever more than about 5,000 copies made. I'm sure that Dad got his through some association with the men before they even got back to the United States, sharing addresses and names so that so that they could get a copy. Because I'm sure that Ben promised a copy because he had this film, and I'm told that this film was what do we want to say, bootlegged out of the camp. I've heard stories about guys carving out the bottom of a heel of a shoe and putting rolls of camera film in them. And certainly as many photos as he's got, he would have needed more than just the shoes that he had. So I'm guessing he had several friends transporting all this film back in the heel of their shoe or some other place they could keep it and hide it from the Nazis. But I want to read you an interesting story about the Red Cross parcels and also about the food. And I hope this doesn't gross you out, but I'm reading from the book. And this photo, by the way, there you can see, if you look real close, you can see the guy's carrying a large tub. That tub had the soup in it, which was essentially what you got most days. And it says, to the left is the chow tub. 136 men had to divide one tub of soup up equally. Now think of that. That was a good-sized tub, but it's 136 men. And I assume 136 men, I don't know this for sure, but I think that might be a size of one barrack. So like 36A would be a barrack, 36B would be a barrack. So I think that's about the right number for a barrack. And it says, remember the worms and bugs in that greasy soup? Sometimes if a man was lucky, he found a piece of meat. But men have been known to find everything from teeth to eyeballs. You might not want your soup then, but if you didn't, someone else did. Wow. Okay, so that's a little about the food. And on this next page, remember the Red Cross parcels? There's a photo of the men carrying their Red Cross parcels back. And these photos aren't from a generic prison camp. This is from Dad's prison camp. So when I was a little kid, I would look at this and try to find my dad in the photos. And I never did, although there was a couple that I thought that looked like him and could have been him. Anyway, this was interesting about the Red Cross parcels. It says, payday, the day that Red Cross parcels are issued. When the cry, Red Cross parcels, was made, you should have seen the men scramble to get there first. Can you imagine? At Stalag XVIIb, which was the first camp Dad was at, he said any day was payday if parcels came in. So if the Red Cross made a delivery of parcels at the first camp Dad was at, they would distribute them right then. But according to Ben Felper, the author of this book, in Stalag XVIIb, the issue was usually on Friday, regardless of when the parcels came. Now, you guys have heard this term in old war movies, and he uses it quite a bit in here, and Dad uses it occasionally. Jerries. The Jerries, the Germans, the Nazis. He said the Jerries had a cute little trick, so this is kind of reinforcing what Dad said and what Tracy said the other night. Jerry had a cute little trick of puncturing all canned goods with his bayonet. Even the butter and powdered milk did not escape the sword. Every week or so, they had searches, and any cans found unpunctured were confiscated. All empty cans were turned in, and any man who did not throw more than 2 or 3 cans into the bin had to go back and get more, or the guard would not let him get into the parcel line. So you couldn't get a new Red Cross parcel unless you put 2 or 3 tin cans from your old parcel in the garbage can to prove that you weren't hoarding them for an escape, even though it seems to me it would be kind of hard if they did puncture most, if not all, those cans with a bayonet. And Danny, my sister-in-law, was helping me out the other night. I could not remember the name of what they called the American flyboys, what the German and Austrian populations called them. But I said, or Dad said one part in the book, American gangsters. Okay, the word is Flieger gangsters, and evidently it's gangsters in any language. And here's the verbiage down here, although I know it's in reverse. So I found it. So I don't speak German or don't know the German language. So I Googled Fliegler, and it said pilot, which makes a lot of sense. Pilot gangsters. Okay, so that was the terminology that the German public and the Austrian public had for the American airmen. All right, now we're going to talk about roll call. Roll call was twice a day, and we all went out to the compound at the same time, standing in lines 4 deep to be counted. When the whole camp was checked, we were permitted to go back to the barracks. If a barrack did not check out, they would have another roll call. The rest of us would have to wait until they checked out before anyone could go back inside. It was really rough when it happened on a cold day. Now, I'm not going to read a lot from this book, but on the opposite page there, if I can still find it, this is what some of the guys did during roll call. Now, they wouldn't have done this in cold weather, but they might have done this in nice weather. And this was the American GI's way of messing with the German guards. It says, one of the ways we used to fool the Jerrys was to have a small boy stand on the feet of a big tall boy. So they're calling them boys, but of course they're guys, they're American airmen. So a short guy and a tall guy inside his overcoat. So I hope it just said it was trying to reconnect. I hope we didn't lose the signal there. But it's, I'll read that again just so you got it. One of the many ways we used to fool the Germans was to have a small boy stand on the feet of a big tall boy inside his overcoat. Jerry did not catch on to this, but he sure blew his top when the number kept changing each time we were counted. So it was a little game that the GIs were playing with the German guards just to throw them off. So if they counted 150 4 rows deep, and then the next time they only counted 149, it was because they took a small guy and he stood on top of the feet of a taller guy inside his overcoat, so it cut the number back down by 1 to 149, and then he jumped back in line, and of course he was probably in the 3rd or 4th row. That's why, you know, it wasn't a guy standing in the front row. So anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. So there was some humor going on in the barracks, and I guess just anything they could do to mess the Germans up, but probably not on a cold day. Everybody wanted to get back inside. Once, the YMCA sent musical instruments to us. A man in our barracks played the xylophone, of all things, and took the one that was sent. I found it hard to believe. I understood a trumpet or a flute, but a xylophone? But a guy in their barracks could play a xylophone. Our guard heard him and told a German officer. We were surprised one day when the German commander of the camp made an inspection of our barracks and wanted to hear him play. He was playing, and the Kriegies, meaning the other prisoners and Germans, were enjoying his music too much to notice anything else in the barracks. Since they had arrived so quickly, the men had no warning to stop what they were doing, including a man who was heating water in the back corner. We were not permitted to heat water, but you could do it by crossing 2 electric wires. Yeah, how safe is that, right? But if you want to heat water, if you've got tea or you've got some of that coffee out of your Red Cross parcel and you want a hot cup of coffee, you're going to find a way to get the water hot. So 2 wires stuck into hot water, I guess off of a light bulb or anything they had in there where they had electric. Dad says, luckily, a G16, and I don't know the terminology on that, so I assume it's probably one of the guys in the barracks assigned as kind of a guy to watch and pay attention, and maybe they took turns doing that, got to him before the Germans could see what happened. It wasn't too long before men in our barracks started to come up short on food that they were storing. And keep in mind, they didn't have lockers. They didn't have a lot of places to store this stuff. They had bunks, and I'm not sure if they had much other than underneath the bunk. And if the bunks were double, like my friend Tracy Jackson said the other night, she sent me a photo, she believes they were double bunks instead of singles, like 2 together and then 2 below. You know, you could store a few things up there, but you were trying to sleep up there, so I'm guessing they put all their extra food from the Red Cross parcels under their beds. So it says things started coming up missing, and one man in our barracks caught a GI stealing another GI's food in the middle of the night. We didn't know what we were supposed to do with a fellow GI caught stealing. We knew we could not turn him over to the Germans, so the men decided to have a trial with all the GIs in our barracks as the jury. He admitted to the thievery. We could have had him moved to another barracks, but that would have been unfair to the barracks we sent him to. After a long discussion, we decided it was fair to keep him in our barracks without talking to him or having anything to do with him as long as we were there. So, Dad was there about a year.